there's a part of you you've spent your whole life avoiding. It shows up in anger you can't explain, in envy you won't admit, in the patterns you keep repeating. You hide it behind smiles, silence, and small talk. But it doesn't disappear. It waits just behind your eyes. That part of you has a name, the shadow. Carl Jung called it the dark side of the psyche, not because it's evil, but because it's hidden. It's made of everything you repress, the shame, the rage, the fear, and also the untapped strength and creativity you were told not to trust. And until you face it, it controls you from the shadows. Few understood this better than RobertAJohnson, a man whose life was shaped by near-death, ecstatic visions, and a relentless search for meaning. His journey into the depths of the unconscious wasn't theoretical. It was personal, spiritual, and at times perilous. In this video, we'll explore how his experience with Carl Jung and his inner world became a lifelong path of transformation, and what we can learn from his descent into the shadow and return. And why those who turn toward it discover something extraordinary, not just healing, but wholeness. Because you cannot become your true self by chasing the light alone. To be whole, you must embrace your shadow. What if the deepest truth about life, about healing, meaning, and joy, was something you saw, not in the outer world, but in a near-death vision as a child? What if you glimpsed something golden, then spent the rest of your life trying to understand it? That was the journey of RobertAJohnson, a man shaped not by fame or success, but by vision, pain, and radical inner work. When RobertAJohnson was just 11 years old, he was in a devastating car accident that left him teetering between life and death. But what he encountered in that near-death state wasn't terror. It was awe. He described it as the ecstatic world. In the darkness, he saw golden visions, radiant, euphoric, eternal, and then he was pulled back. He survived. But something inside him didn't want to return. The visions were gone. The world was dull again. The beauty he'd touched now felt unreachable. He couldn't bear it. Haunted by the contrast between the golden world and everyday reality, Robert struggled to live in what others called normal life. He didn't fit. Some called him Parsifal, the innocent fool. Others couldn't understand why he seemed so different. But inside, he knew he had touched something real, something more than the outer world could ever offer. Years later, everything shifted when he encountered Carl Jung. Jung didn't dismiss Robert's experience. He validated it. And more than that, he gave him a path forward. Dr. Jung told me to spend most of my time alone, have a separate room in the house to be used for nothing but inner work. He said it was not the least important whether I accomplished anything outwardly in this life, since my one task was to contribute to the evolution of the collective unconscious. Robert followed that calling. He turned inward, and what he found would shape the rest of his life. Decades later, at the age of 54 and again feeling lost in his life, Robert traveled alone to India. After a long, exhausting journey and having lost all his luggage, he checked into a hotel, tired, discouraged, ready to sleep off his disillusionment. And then he looked out the window, and there it was, the golden world. Again, not in death, but in life. It had returned, not as a vision to escape into, but as a living truth, waiting patiently in the stillness of the soul. The golden world is there all the time. It is not some other place or time, but a state of consciousness. What if the paradise we seek isn't out there, but hidden inside the very shadow we're taught to ignore? In the next section, we'll explore what it truly means to face that shadow and how embracing it might just be the key to becoming whole. You try to be good. You try to be calm, kind, understanding. You say the right things. You do what's expected. You keep the peace. But then, you snap at someone you love. You sabotage the opportunity you've been waiting for. You feel envy, rage, bitterness, and you don't know why. You wonder, where did that come from? That's the shadow, not a monster, not a demon. Just the part of you you've locked away because you were told it wasn't acceptable, because you believed that to be good, you had to be less than whole. Carl Jung said, "The shadow is the person you would rather not be." And RobertAJohnson expanded on this with clarity. The shadow is not something outside you. It is you. The parts you deny, repress, avoid, they don't disappear. They form a mirror image of who you are. And it follows you, whether you like it or not. We've all been taught to curate ourselves, to show only the parts that are likable, calm, successful, loving. But everything we hide, the anger, the ambition, the desire, the grief, it collects in the dark. And when it's full, it leaks out. Through passive aggression, through anxiety, through projection, through patterns you keep repeating and don't understand. Most people hear shadow and think evil, but that's a mistake. The shadow isn't just where your rage lives, it's where your power lives. It holds your assertiveness, your creativity, your honesty, your boundaries, your ability to say no. Everything you need and were taught to suppress. It's not here to destroy you, it's here to complete you. If you're shy, your shadow might be bold. If you're always in control, your shadow might long to let go. If you're too nice, your shadow might be tired of being walked on. By denying these parts, you build a mask. But masks crack, and when they do, the shadow breaks through, often in the worst ways. To embrace the shadow isn't to become worse, it's to become real. It's to take back the parts of yourself that you've abandoned in the name of being good. It's to finally see yourself whole. But how do you begin? How do you turn toward the very thing you were told to run from your whole life? That's what we'll uncover next. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Why do you keep repeating the same patterns? Why do you sabotage your own progress? Why do you explode over small things? Why, despite all your efforts, do you still feel incomplete? Maybe it's not a lack of motivation. Maybe it's not because you're weak or broken. Maybe, just maybe, it's because you're being dragged by a part of you that you've refused to face. You can either be led and guided in life by your shadow or be dragged through life by it. These words aren't metaphor, they're a warning. When we exile parts of ourselves, they don't disappear, they wait. And the longer we ignore them, the louder they become, until they finally erupt as anxiety, rage, depression, addiction, projection, and unbearable shame. This is the hidden war within you, and you can't win it by fighting harder. You win it by integrating what's been lost. So, how does the shadow even form? You weren't born ashamed, you weren't born divided, you were born whole. But the moment you entered culture, family, school, society, you were told what was acceptable. Be quiet, don't be angry, don't cry, don't be selfish. So you adapted. You silenced parts of yourself to survive. We are all born whole, but somehow culture demands that we live out only part of our nature and refuse other parts of ourselves. But those rejected parts didn't die. They were banished to the shadow. And over time, if you ignore them long enough, they take on a life of their own. What starts as a whisper becomes a dragon. Someone once asked Carl Jung, "How do you find your shadow?" He answered, "How do you find the dragon that has swallowed you? You may not see your shadow, but you feel it. In your shame, in your triggers, in the way others irritate you for reasons you can't explain." And here's the twist. You're often the last person to recognize it. By definition, RobertAJohnson writes, the shadow is a part of you that you don't know. If you can talk about it, it's already conscious and no longer shadow. That means other people are more likely to see your shadow than you are, and that's an uncomfortable truth. The traits you judge in others are often reflections of what's hidden in yourself. And yet, there's something even more surprising. The shadow isn't just a dumpster of darkness. It holds your gold, your assertiveness, your creativity, your compassion, your power. And curiously, as Robert writes, people resist the noble aspects of their shadow more strenuously than they hide the dark sides. It is more disrupting to find that you have a profound nobility of character than to find out you are a bum. Let that sink in. You're not just hiding what's bad about you, you're hiding what's brilliant. And if you don't integrate it, your life will feel half-lived. We've been taught to think of life as a climb upward toward success, discipline, mastery, but there's a second half of the journey, and it's not about climbing, it's about healing. Generally, the first half of life is devoted to the cultural process. The second half of life is devoted to restoring the wholeness, making holy of life. Wholeness. That's the real goal. To be holy is to be whole, not perfect, but integrated, not flawless, but fully yourself. The real spiritual task isn't becoming better, It's becoming real. But to do that, something must die, not your body, but your ego. Because only when the ego steps aside can the full self, the shadow and the light come together. And that's where your transformation begins. You've tried to be good, to do what's right, to suppress your anger, ignore your envy, silence your darker impulses, thinking that's the path to peace. But if you're honest, doesn't it feel off, like something's missing? That's because every time you emphasize your best self, your patience, kindness, humility, there's a hidden cost, a buried reaction, a lopsided self. And like a seesaw stuck in one position too long, your psyche begins to tilt dangerously, waiting for a collapse. This isn't failure, it's nature. And if you ignore this truth, it won't go away. It will come for you in your relationships, your moods, your self-worth. RobertAJohnson uses a powerful image to explain this inner conflict, the seesaw. On one side sits your righteous, socially accepted self, the part that strives, smiles, obeys. On the other side lives what society tells you to reject: your anger, lust, arrogance, selfishness. But Johnson warns us, no quality can ever be discarded. It can only be moved between these two sides of the seesaw. In other words, whatever you exile doesn't vanish, it hides, and the law of the psyche is balance. If you overload one side of your personality with light, the other side, your shadow, will build pressure in secret until it explodes. Ever had a moment where you acted completely out of character? Said something you didn't mean? Sabotaged yourself in a way you couldn't explain? That was your shadow, the part of you that's been forced into the dark, demanding to be heard. A haunting image from a medieval manuscript reveals the deeper spiritual paradox. The tree of knowledge grows from Adam's navel. On the left, the Virgin Mary, fully clothed, hands its fruit to those seeking salvation. On the right, Eve, naked, offers the same fruit to those damned by desire. Same tree, two hands, two outcomes. Whenever we create, we also destroy. Whenever we choose light, we cast a shadow. And yet, this is not a curse, it's reality. As Robert writes, to act is to sin, to create is to destroy at the same moment. We cannot make light without a corresponding darkness. India understood this. It balanced Brahma, the god of creation, with Shiva, the god of destruction, while Vishnu sat in the middle, holding the opposites together. This is where most people go wrong. They strive to live entirely on the good side of the seesaw, believing this will lead to spiritual success. But Johnson warns, such a condition is unstable. The true holy place is the center, not sainthood, but balance. As Jung taught, the ego and the shadow come from the same source and exactly balance each other. To be whole, to be spiritually grounded, is to stop pretending. You must acknowledge the part of yourself you're most afraid of. Not to indulge it, but to integrate it. Because when you suppress your darkness, it controls you. But when you face it with honesty, it transforms you. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Have you ever held it together so perfectly? Bit your tongue, smiled through the discomfort, did the right thing, only to later snap at someone for no reason? Maybe it was your partner, your child, a total stranger, and afterward you wondered, where the hell did that come from? That wasn't just a bad mood. That was the shadow, balancing the seesaw. Your psyche works like a seesaw. This is one of RobertAJohnson's most powerful metaphors. On one side, your virtues, kindness, patience, politeness. On the other, your vices, resentment, selfishness, anger. Every act of goodness you perform tips the balance. And here's the catch. The psyche always demands balance. If you don't allow your shadow some room to speak, to breathe, it will find its own way out, often at the worst possible moment. Johnson shares a painfully honest story. I remember a weekend when I put up with very difficult guests who stayed days beyond their invitation. I exercised Herculean patience and courtesy and sighed in great relief when they left. I thought I had earned something nice by my virtue, so I went to the nursery to buy something beautiful for my garden. Before I knew what was happening, I picked a fight with the nurseryman and made a miserable spectacle of myself. Since I did not pick up my shadow consciously, I landed it on this poor stranger. Balance was served, but in a clumsy and stupid way. Sound familiar? Think of the last time you lashed out unexpectedly, sabotaged your peace, or hurt someone for no clear reason. That wasn't just stress, that was shadow projection. You've been taught to strive for goodness, to be polite, calm, forgiving. But have you noticed? Striving for perfection doesn't bring peace, it brings pressure. What if the goal isn't perfection at all, but wholeness? Wholeness means making space for all of who you are, not just the polished parts. It means recognizing that your anger, jealousy, and fear have something to teach you. It means understanding that the darker side of your nature isn't your enemy, it's your neglected twin. As Johnson reminds us, to own one's own shadow is to reach a holy place, an inner center, not attainable in any other way. To fail this is to fail one's own sainthood and to miss the purpose of life. You don't need to be perfect to find peace. You need to be real, fully human, fully whole. Projection is easier than integration. It's easier to offload your shadow onto the world than to face it consciously. But every time you suppress it, the cost is your balance, your sanity, your relationships, your authenticity. Johnson urges us to honor one's shadow, not deny it. Why? Because if you don't, it will make its claim, either intelligently, through conscious inner work, or stupidly by exploding into your life through misdirected emotion. So, the question is, are you willing to stop pretending and start integrating? Only then can the seesaw of your soul come to rest at that sacred, stable center point. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever exploded at someone and then immediately thought, where did that even come from? Or felt paralyzed with exhaustion, not physical but emotional, like something deep inside you is draining your energy without explanation? That is your shadow, unloved and unacknowledged, hijacking your life when you least expect it. We all like to think we're good people, that we're kind, rational, compassionate. But buried beneath the image we present to the world is a darker truth. The anger we suppress, the envy we deny, the desires we bury, and pretending they don't exist doesn't make them go away. In fact, the more we deny them, the stronger they become. RobertAJohnson warns us, to refuse the dark side of one's nature is to store up or accumulate the darkness. This is later expressed as a black mood, psychosomatic illness, or unconsciously inspired accidents. Think about your worst moments, the passive-aggressive sarcasm, the sudden road rage, the cold silence, the anxiety that seems to come out of nowhere. These aren't just bad moods, these are eruptions of the shadow, your psyche's way of restoring balance. And when entire societies deny their shadow, Johnson says, we are presently dealing with the accumulation of a whole society that has worshipped its light side and refused the dark. The front page of any newspaper hurls the collective shadow at us. Wars, riots, hatred, polarization. The world is a mirror showing us our collective refusal to be whole. But the problem isn't just out there. It's in you and how you unconsciously project your shadow onto others. Ever found yourself irrationally disliking someone? It might not be about them at all. It might be your own rejected self staring back at you. Johnson writes, the tendency to see one's shadow out there in a specific person or a group of people is the most dangerous aspect of the modern psyche. And here's the kicker. We don't just disown our bad traits, we disown our greatness too. We see courage, wisdom, and charisma in others and shrink, saying, that's not me. But Johnson warns, people are as frightened of their capacity for nobility as of their darkest sides. So we worship heroes instead of becoming them. But here's the good news. When you meet your shadow consciously, you reclaim your power. Johnson shares a powerful example. A wise woman once showed me how to get more energy. She instructed me to throw a heavy towel at the floor as hard as I could and shout. When I walked out, there was fire in my eyes. I had energy and stamina and voice. Why did it work? Because the shadow backed him, but didn't overwhelm him. Even animals sense this hidden fire. As Johnson humorously notes, parrots learn profanity more easily than common phrases since we utter our curses with so much vigor. Your shadow holds your untapped energy, your intensity, your vitality. And if you're in midlife, tired of swinging between burnout and bursts of drama, there's hope. The middle of the seesaw, once feared as boring or bland, becomes a place of peace and even ecstasy. When you befriend your shadow, you stop surviving and start living fully. Have you ever felt torn in two? Like a part of you wants to rest, but another part screams to hustle? A part of you wants love, but another pushes people away? You want to speak your truth, and yet you stay silent. It's not that you're broken, it's that you're stuck in a contradiction. And contradiction is soul-killing. Contradiction is when opposing forces clash, cancel each other out, and leave you paralyzed. No movement, no peace, just that heavy fog of meaninglessness. As RobertAJohnson puts it, contradiction brings the crushing burden of meaninglessness. One can endure any suffering if it has meaning, but meaninglessness is unbearable. So why does this happen? Because you've been trained by culture, religion, or upbringing to choose one right side, to be either strong or vulnerable, logical or emotional, ambitious or content. But life doesn't work like that. Not really. Real life is messy and full of paradox. Maybe you're exhausted from trying to be good all the time. Maybe you hide your aggression or mask your needs behind a smile. You meditate by day and binge Netflix by night. You tell yourself to rise above, but secretly want to scream. That's not hypocrisy. That's your soul begging for wholeness. All our energy lies in our shadow, Johnson reminds us. Ignoring it makes us feel lifeless, exhausted, and lazy. A confrontation with one's shadow fills one up with energy and stamina. So what's the way forward? Not contradiction, but paradox. Paradox is when opposites are not enemies, but partners. Fire and water, work and rest, light and dark. Day is comprehensible only in contrast to night. Masculinity has relevance only in contrast to femininity, winning and losing, eating and fasting, earning and giving. These are not opposites, but are all necessary to the human condition. To live in paradox is to stop fighting parts of yourself and instead begin to honor all of it. This is what poet William Blake meant when he said, "Go to heaven for form and to hell for energy, and marry the two. We don't need to kill the dark to love the light. We need to embrace both. The war inside you, between ambition and rest, love and independence, control and surrender, doesn't need to be solved. It needs to be witnessed, honored, balanced." This is why symbolic rituals matter. Writing down your hidden feelings and burning the paper, screaming into a towel before a performance, practicing restraint not to punish, but to honor your fire. These are not silly tricks, they're sacred acts. A symbolic or ceremonial ritual affects one as much as any event, as long as it means something for you, says Johnson. Every healthy society once had these rituals, ways to channel the shadow, release tension, and honor paradox. But now, most of us carry our contradictions silently. We hide them in busyness, addictions, perfectionism, or depression, and the suffering is real. As Kierkegaard once said, "I can't be bothered to ride, the motion is too violent. I can't be bothered to walk, it's strenuous. I can't be bothered to lie down, for I'd have to get up again. I just can't be bothered." That's not laziness, that's spiritual fatigue, the kind that comes when we live in contradiction too long. To move from contradiction to paradox is a leap of consciousness, a shift from either or to both and. Religion, art, myth, and psychology all point to this truth. Not to pick sides, but to reconcile. Not to destroy one part, but to embrace the totality of what it means to be human. To love and still feel fear. To be powerful and still uncertain. To surrender and still show up. To stay loyal to paradox is to earn the right to wholeness. And that's the ultimate point. Not perfection, not purity, but wholeness. So the next time you feel pulled in opposite directions, pause, don't fight it. Hold the paradox. You're not broken, you're becoming whole. Have you ever been torn in half between what you should do and what your soul quietly longs for? Maybe you're trying to be strong, responsible, spiritual, but there's another part of you, tired, raw, rebellious, begging to be seen. You're caught. One part pushes forward, the other pulls you back. And you wonder, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just be whole? This tension, this endless battle between your higher ideals and hidden urges, it isn't a flaw, it's the very terrain of inner transformation. You're not broken, You're standing at the edge of something sacred. Most of us are never taught how to live with contradiction. We try to solve it, fix it, suppress it, until the burden becomes unbearable. You might feel tired, discouraged, even lifeless. But according to Jungian analyst RobertAJohnson, this pain has a purpose: to be in a situation where there is no way out, or to be in a conflict where there is no solution, is the classical beginning of individuation or self-realization. The answer doesn't lie in choosing one side over the other. It lies in reconciling both. Enter the Mandorla, an ancient hidden symbol of healing. Imagine two circles overlapping. One represents your shadow, the other, your light. Where they intersect forms an almond-shaped space, the Mandorla. The Mandorla is nothing less than the overlap of the opposites. The place where light and dark begin to touch is the most profound religious experience we can have in life. It's in this overlap, this sacred wound, that true healing begins, not by destroying the dark, not by worshiping only the light, but by letting both speak and be heard. You don't have to pick between being a disciplined parent and a wild artist, between being spiritual and sensual, between structure and surrender. In fact, your wholeness depends on learning to hold these tensions without collapsing into despair. This isn't weakness, it's evolution. It's the path of maturity, the ground of the soul's deepest transformation. As Johnson writes, to own one's own shadow is to prepare the ground for spiritual experience. Conflict to paradox to revelation, that is, the divine progression. And when nothing else works, when not even your strongest efforts bring relief, it is the Mandorla that shows the way. When the most Herculean efforts and the finest discipline no longer keep the painful contradictions of life at bay, we are all in need of the Mandorla. The Mandorla is more than a symbol. It's an invitation to stop fighting yourself, to stop dividing your soul, to become one. As T.S. Eliot once wrote, the fire and the rose are one. That's the secret of wholeness, not good overcoming evil, but light and shadow finally embracing.